Hey guys, this video is for solving system of inequalities. So the first thing I'm going to go through is just to remind you of the steps to solve a system of an inequality. So the first thing is to make sure that your inequalities are solved for y so that you can actually graph them, because the next step is that you're going to graph them. So the easiest way to do this is to make sure that they look kind of like y equals mx plus b. And once you've graphed the equations, then the thing you're going to have to worry about is whether you have a solid or a dashed line, and we'll go over that in just a little bit. And the other thing you'll also have to do is, because it's an inequality, you are going to have to shade. So, I'm going to give an example here in just a little bit, but right now I just want to give you a little chart. We did take notes on this, but I wasn't sure if everybody had that at home. I'm assuming that we don't, so I apologize. You can just skim through the video if you know this already. But this solid or dashed line, if you do not have a line underneath, then it is a dashed line. So if you are less than or greater than, you are a dashed line. If you are less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, you are a solid line. This should sound familiar. Now, as far as shading goes, we talked about above and below. So if you are less than or equal to, you shade below the line. If you are a greater than or equal to or a greater than, then you shade above the line. If you do not get this below or above business, then what we did was we picked a random point on either side of the line, and we took that and we plugged it in for that equation, and we saw if it was in the region by seeing if it was true. So if I plugged it in and got 0 is greater than -3, then that point would be in the shaded region, and I would shade on that side of the line. If I got like -2 equal or is greater than 0, that's false, and then I would shade on the opposite side of the line. So here's an example. It'll say something like solve the system, and then you'll be given a set of inequalities. So I'm going to do a horizontal inequality. So y is greater than 1. And the second inequality I'm going to write here is going to be sort of like standardish form. So we got x minus 2y is greater than or equal to 4. So according to those steps, the first thing that we need to do is to solve that bottom equation for y before we do anything else, because we need to be able to graph it, and we want to use y equals mx plus b form to do that. So the bottom equation needs to be solved for y. Now, when I do this, you're going to notice that I'm left with a -2y. And when you divide everything by a negative, don't forget, you flip the inequality symbol when you divide by a negative number. So that greater than now becomes a less than symbol. So we get y is less than or equal to positive 1/2 x minus 2. Be careful of those negatives. I'm just going to rewrite the equations over here. So I'm just going to rewrite that bottom one so it looks nice and solved for y. Now I'm going to change my note paper to grid paper here so that I can draw an axis and actually solve. Remember, when you solve a system of inequalities, it's solved by graphing. Has to be, because our answer is a shaded region, not just a ordered pair. So the first line I'm going to graph is the first one up top is y is greater than 1. I'm going to graph that in pink. So y is greater than 1. There's no x there. It is a horizontal line. Remember, hoivux, right? Horizontal line, 0, slope, y equals a number. So I have there at that positive thing. Notice I'm doing a dashed line because it's not an equals to. And because it's greater than, I'm going to shade above. If you don't get the above thing, then you could test a point. For instance, I could test 0, 0. When I plug that in, I get that 0 is greater than 1. That is not true, so I would shade on the opposite side of the origin. Let's see here. So the second line I'm going to do in blue. The hopes was to get purple, but spoiler alert, doesn't turn into purple. So anyway, we graph the y-intercept first, and then we use the slope to generate more points. And because this is an equals to, less than or equals to, it has to be a solid line. and it is a less than, so we're going to be shading below the line. Again, if you don't get the below thing, you can use the origin because that's clearly on one side. When you plug the origin in, you'll get 0 is less than or equal to -2. 0 is not less than -2, so you'd shade on the opposite side of the origin. Now all I'm going to do here is clearly define where that overlap is. So it's kind of hard to see. It's supposed to turn purple, and it didn't really do it for us. So I'm going to go in with navy and show you it's this little tiny triangular portion. If we had more of the graph, it would look bigger, I suppose. But that's the answer. Now, just off to the side here, I'm just going to reiterate the fact that I got a dashed line in this particular horizontal thing because it didn't have an equals to, and I shaded above because it's a greater than symbol. On the bottom one, I'm just reiterating the fact that it's solid because it's an equals to, and I shaded below because it's a less than. And remember, the answer is the shaded overlap. That's all for now. See ya.